while doing any kind of work with resin, there are a lot of mistakes that can be made. It is very, very easy to make these mistakes, and it just takes a lot of learning and a lot of trial and error to discover what the mistakes are and how to work past them, how to fix them, or if you can't fix them, how to make sure that you don't make them again. So that's what this video is just going to be going over. It's going to be going over a lot of common mistakes that I myself have made during the process of learning how to make dice and how to work with resin in general. Potential mistake number 1, the dice isn't quite set inside. So there's a couple ways that you can see that. If you look closely, you can see that there's bubbles in here. If you move it, yeah, you can see the bubbles are moving too. So that just means that it hasn't set. Maybe it hasn't been warm enough. Maybe you didn't put the light on for long enough. So what we're going to do to fix that is we're just going to turn the heat back on, put the light back on, and then let it set for a little bit longer. If the dice will not set inside the mold, just very, very stubborn. If it's solid enough, you can take it out of the mold and let it dry like that. If it's still wet, it could mess with the numbers. So I would advise against doing this if at all possible, but if it's just the middle that isn't set and the outside is perfectly fine, then this is okay to do. But again, just be very careful when doing that. And the potential mistake is that you didn't fill the mold quite enough. So how you're going to tell that is there's going to be lots of bubbles and inconsistencies in the top. Like in here, it looks like there's just chunks missing out of it. So that's because there wasn't quite enough resin inside the mold and it formed bubbles when you put the lid on, because there wasn't enough resin, so there was air in there to make up the rest of the space, and that just kind of messes with it. So unfortunately, after that point, once your dice is like this, there's really no way of fixing it. It's just a learning point. So in the future, you can avoid doing that by making sure that you overfill the mold just a tiny bit so that there's a little bubble over the top, so that way the mold is overfilled so you don't get big chunks missing out of it. Third mistake to be wary of is if your numbers don't turn out so well. So if you look really closely on here, you can see there's a 4 that's supposed to be there, but it didn't quite turn out like that. So what happened with this dice is you can tell it's obviously full of things. I didn't leave quite enough time between the layers for it to set, and I removed it from the mold too early. So it was still wet on the edges when I removed it from the mold, and then I left it under the UV light to cure for a little bit longer. But by that point, the damage had already been done because the sides were still so liquidy that it didn't set, and you can see the edges are really soft and the numbers are worn. So just avoid doing that. Make sure that the layers are fully set before you remove it from the mold. Another example of what to be wary of, which I don't actually have an example for because it just turns out to be such a catastrophic mess that I have to throw it away, is if you have an item that's too large inside of your dice. So if it's too big and it fills up most of the mold, or you have to really shove it in the mold to get it to fit, that means that it's too big and the resin will not cure around it. So you have to spend a lot of time on every single side of the dice and let it cure independently. And even then, there's going to be a lot of room for error, a lot of mistakes. It's not going to look very nice. It's not going to set well. So the best thing to do is just avoid that. And if you're going to put things in the dice, like this, for example, you can do it layer by layer, like in a different video that I have. And you can see that process for doing it, or make sure that it's small enough. You can't even see it in here, but yeah, just make sure that it's small enough that the resin has room to set around it, and then that should fix the problem. A potential problem, the dice doesn't set. So you can see here, it's completely liquid on the inside. The sides are a little bit firm, but it did break once I took it out of the mold. So the problem with this was that there's just too much coloring in it, so the light could not penetrate the sides of it. It couldn't get to the inside. So this is just rubbish at this point. There's really no way to save this. I could try putting it under the light, but at this point it would it's just getting everywhere. Yeah, you can see it's just dripping everywhere. It's a complete mess. So resin is a very tricky thing to master. Like everything, it just takes work. You're gonna learn by trial and error. That is the best teacher. The videos that I have here are hopefully that helps you a little bit so you can avoid some of the really common errors and learn how to troubleshoot, how to realize what mistakes you've made and how to fix them. What I would recommend if you're just starting out is to do one dice at a time. Don't try to make a full set right off the start, because then you're just going to be wasting a whole bunch of materials. So just do one dice at a time until you learn the process, until you master it. Then you can start making full sets. Another thing I would just recommend is starting with the smaller dice. So start with like D4s or D6s, because 20-sided dice, they are a lot more complicated. It just takes a lot longer to cure because you have to, you know, make sure that every single side of it cures. So just start with the smaller numbers, the smaller number of sides. That's just going to be a much easier starting point for when you're starting to learn this. Yeah, so that's about it. Thank you so much for watching the entirety of this tutorial. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, you can make sure to leave a comment in the below this video. I will try to get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Just thank you so much.